Okay, welcome everybody to the second podcast, which is going to be a review of World Telemedia 56, which was held in Marbella on the 14th to 16th of October last week. I'm here with Paul Skeldon, who's the esteemed editor of Telemedia Magazine, Telemedia News and Telemedia Online. He's a busy boy. And what we're going to do is over the next 20 minutes or so is race through the conference session, give you some highlights and just to summarize what we felt were the salient points that came out of this year's show. So hello Paul, how are you doing?
Hello mate, I'm fine. I'm recovered. Are you recovered from what was a superb show?
Another excellent show. Yeah, very perky mate, thank you very much. I've been sleeping for the last 6 days, so I'm going to be digging into the back of my mind to try and remember that we were even in Marbella.
Absolutely, it'll all come flooding back. It was very interesting and exciting.
It was one of the best. So kicking off on Monday, we started with, it's great to get Tony Coyne involved and nice to see MCOM Payout Services taking a leading role. And I know one of the issues that's really close to Tony's heart as the industry tries to tackle some of the issues from the past, which is obviously one of consumer confidence, is how we deal with consumers, not just from the engagement point of view, but really thinking about how we develop relationships with them and keeping hold of them to try and maximize the benefits of that relationship. It's getting harder and harder to engage and keep customers on line with value-added services, I think.
Well, yeah, it was interesting. We sort of started the show at the end of the sort of consumer journey, with the sort of managing sort of their sort of expectations and to some degree their complaints and problems. What I thought was interesting was that sort of it's now a kind of accepted role and part of the industry to professionally handle what may go wrong, and I think part of that is making sure things don't go wrong. But also having in place the sort of processes to handle it when they do. And hearing from sort of Tony and MCOM about sort of the payout services. I mean, they're obviously trying to smooth that sort of transition from the customer paying right through to the network operator releasing the money to the merchants and service providers, which is a great part of it. But I think it was really interesting as well to hear from Johnny Brown at SB Media Group, who talking about sort of handling those customer complaints and sort of having to sort of really be on top of not only what people are sort of coming in and sort of complaining about, which is still to some extent the subscription fraud idea, or I don't remember doing that. A lot of the time it's just because it doesn't appear right on their bill and things, but it's also that they're people that are arriving at this point through so many different channels. So it's not just now that you're getting complaining phone calls, you're getting emails, WhatsApps, Facebook messages, you're being flamed on Twitter. I think he made some interesting points, as you can see in the video interview we did with him after the session that we posted on the site. That's quite a challenge, but the technology and the willingness is there to deal with it.
So I guess in short, if you're in this business for the long term, there's just no way that you can cut corners when it comes to looking after your customers. Did you also feel as though this was a UK specific problem? Because I noticed the panel was obviously very UK orientated, and we heard some great stories about how DCB value-added services are flying around the world. Did you sense that was also a problem internationally, or do you think that was very just simply typical of the UK in particular?
I tell you, my feeling is that it's particularly sort of prevalent in the UK. I think there is an element that UK consumers are just way more suspicious about stuff on their phone bill. I think in other countries, particularly other regions where they're much more used to carrier billing, it's fine, and they do use carrier billing so routinely that they're not really sort of surprised when something appears on their bill. I think that the education part here in the UK isn't so great, so it's still quite a shocker to people. I think there are still elements of subscription fraud going about. I mean, it's almost unavoidable. But I think sort of as a whole industry globally, that the key message really from that session is, like any business these days, you've got to have really, really good customer service, and you've got to do it through all the available channels. because no matter what the problem might be, you need to be contactable. And you know, as we all know, like when we're trying to sort of get our boiler fixed, or can't sort of get Sky TV to work or whatever, you want to be able to contact these people easily and straight away.
Yeah, I mean I mean we're going to touch on demand for subscription services and the sort of irony that in one sense they've been a major sort of reason for the problems and lack of confidence in certain markets. And we're also going to talk about some of the overseas experiences thanks to the excellent research that was presented by Juniper. But if we sort of move on now, I think, to the second session, which was the first time, and not in fact the last time, that fraud appears as a session at Telemedia. And the point I raised to you at the time was one of the things that we said last year, was how the perception of fraud and dealing with it and tackling it has changed significantly over the last 12 months. And it's gone from being something that, a dirty word that nobody really wanted to talk about, to something that people actively wanted to talk about, to now, I think, in 2019, something which is can be seen as a force for good, or sorry, tackling it as a force for good, or an essential, and obviously something which contributes, very tangibly to growth going forward. So the first appearance that fraud made was on the first day. Another excellent session led by Geoffrey Cleves from Optics. Geoffrey's big on his numbers, isn't he? I know there's a lot of graphs in Geoffrey's presentation.
There were a lot of graphs and a lot of numbers, most of which I have written down and will be appearing shortly online in my extensive review of the event. But I think this, like you say, the fact that fraud keeps now being mentioned and it's not treated so much as a dirty word, I think is an interesting development. I think weirdly, like customer service, having fraud prevention and protection in place is now essential, just like customer services. So all these sort of ancillary offerings around sort of core telemedia business that we've always focused on are now a must-have. And so, fraud prevention, fraud mitigation, and fraud management are increasingly going to be really important. The interesting thing that Jeff said that amazed us all, I think, was he ran through the list of he gave us the top 6 or 5 of the top 6 countries that originate the most amount of fraud, and places 6 down to 2 were India, Iraq, Russia, Belarus, and the Ukraine. And he got the audience to try and guess what number 1 was. Number 1 was Italy, which took everyone by. It was indeed. And when pushed on it as to why that might be, the reason he said with a sort of knowing smile is well, regulatory regimes differ from country to country, and sort of sniggered behind his hand. I think the implication being that there's probably quite a lot of backhanders going on in certain markets, that so they're easier to operate sort of fraudulently in. But so yeah, watch out for stuff going from Italy. But I think the whole idea of tackling fraud was really sort of capably dealt with by this panel. It was really interesting to hear where the fraud is, what kind of fraud we're talking about, which is everything from clickjacking to fraudulent apps through to whole fake websites that are flogging fake goods. It covers the whole spectrum of the digital world. It's not something particularly sort of just focused on the telemedia industry. It's a problem with global e-commerce, really.
I think. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think came through loud and clear from or one of the challenges was obviously that the fraudsters are always one step ahead of the industry, and which is why it's so essential for companies like Optics and Avena to be providing services to service providers. But I sort of sense that despite that being the case, there's quite a lot of confidence around the fact that whilst it's gonna happen, these companies are getting so sophisticated that the chances are that it should and could be tempered to the point where we have an industry that's vibrant and can still grow, understanding that, you know, certain things are still going to slip through the net. And I noticed, of course, that when we heard from a number of the mobile operators, you know, they put fraud prevention, you know, almost top of the list when it comes to assessing DCB vendors that they're prepared to work with. They absolutely need to know that those customers and those clients and those partners have got this front and center, which I think, given that we've now seen such an increase in the number of companies providing these kind of services, means that actually the telemedia industry is pretty well served currently with some pretty clever companies that are really doing a very good job at dealing with this, despite the fact that, of course, you know, they will always be potentially one step behind. But there was some interesting tactics revealed, whereby some of these guys are actually sort of going out of their way to generate their own sort of or simulate fraud, so that they can actually kind of get inside the, you know, the sort of enemy camp, if you like. Did you
Yeah, that's what Evina were talking about, which they spoke about all this on day 3 of the conference. But yeah, they have a whole load of devices set up that they let get hacked, defrauded, and all the rest of it, so they can see how the fraudsters are working. They also buy a lot of the kit that you need to sort of build and manage these frauds on the dark web, and reverse engineer them. So yeah, they're really sort of on board with well, like you say, you'll never be one step ahead of the fraudsters, but you can at least try and sort of keep pace with them. I think between that and the ongoing and ever more sophisticated sort of monitoring that people like Optics do, you're as protected as you're going to be. And yeah, it's always going to be some fraud, but it's still, you know, it doesn't make for a non-viable business. And like I say, this is something that is a problem for the entire digital economy, not just telemedia. So you know, there's a big vested interest in staying on top of this. And yeah, it made for some of the interesting things. It's so nice to hear people openly talking about fraud and what frauds are perpetrated and how to sort of beat them.
I agree, and I think that's good news for the business in general. Okay, so then we moved on to advertising engagement in media, and we were very lucky to have Mark Chandler returning to the World Telemedia lineup, board member of the Interactive News Media Association and CEO of Media Futures. And he started to talk about the way that mobile and media are working together, and how, I suppose, the tangible benefits of the mobile are being offered up to media, particularly with regards to things like ticketing and voucher codes, which I know you talk about a lot, Paul.
No, it was interesting. I mean, Mark spoke twice at the show, second time about the kind of the more wider value-added services area, but he started off with this sort of look at sort of couponing. And it's an interesting idea. It's sort of giving media companies, newspapers, those sorts of things, the ability to have a third-party company basically running a kind of voucher code service for them, so that often when you're buying stuff online, it sort of says, "Do you have a sort of voucher code?" And often you think, "No, maybe I can find one." If you Google, you know, money off vouchers for whatever it is you're buying, you'll get a big long list. Mark's sort of push on this is that if media companies, newspapers, sites, and that have their own dedicated sort of voucher code thing, they'll come up in the search, and it will drive people to their news sites, primarily to get the voucher code. But, you know, while they're there, they might look around, they'll see stuff, they might sign up to a newsletter and all the other value-added service things around media and mobile that he talked about later on. So yeah, he gave an interesting insight into vouchers and voucher codes. Now, we've talked about vouchers for many years, but years ago we had Eagle Eye Technologies and their Buy Me a Beer scheme, where you could buy someone a beer. I mean, that was more than 10 years ago. Yeah, so the idea has been around for ages, but like a lot of these things, it's now finally starting to sort of percolate into the mainstream. And Mark had you know, some examples from around the world of newspaper publishers who are doing just this on their website and driving, you know, sizable increase in traffic which of course for them is ad revenue because it's eyeballs as a result. So yeah, interesting presentation to round off day one there, where we then continued to discuss that over a couple of beers as the evening wore on.
Just on that, as the concluding point that I thought was interesting, and something which Mark probably concluded 5 years ago in Manchester, and which I think highlights a real opportunity for the industry, is that the media in all its forms, mainstream media in all its forms, is still a bit of an untapped market, and that if you're looking for growth opportunities for telemedia value-added services and billing opportunities, media is still very much a vertical that our customers should be looking at, and that means as well as
I mean, it's driving. They need to drive engagement. They need to drive one-off sales of small amounts of content. Carrier billing and the sort of telemedia play is ideal for helping them market, engage, and bill and distribute content, and use that as an on-ramp to them, hopefully sell people into subscribing to a newspaper or magazine or buying stuff through it and driving ancillary revenue that way. So yeah, absolutely. It's been on the radar for so many years, but still it's largely because the media companies, I think, are quite slow to change. It's quite a sort of set in its ways industry, publishing, and I think now they're starting to come around to how you could use digital, really effectively.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so should we move on to Tuesday? And
bright and early, 10 o'clock. Yeah. I remember it well.
And RCS messaging firmly now established as part of the Telemedia suite of products, or certainly established as an issue. Jury seems to be out. On one hand, we had Jason Bryan saying it was absolutely the future. He thought it was fantastic, and so did Nick Millwood, of course, from Mgage. Nick Lane from Mobile Squared, who's done the analysis and the research, although he's the self-proclaimed expert on RCS, still looking to be convinced, I think.
Yeah, I think everyone is. I mean, RCS is essentially Google's answer to iMessage, so it's not as ubiquitous as text. So I think the idea that SMS is going to be replaced somehow is not really on the agenda yet. I think as 2 and 3G networks slowly start to get decommissioned in the sort of next sort of 5 to 10 years, that may change. But I think for now, certainly for the foreseeable future, RCS is a useful thing to add to the messaging portfolio. It's just another way of trying to contact people. It offers more advantages than WhatsApp in terms of sort of reach and not having to sort of opt in twice. It also is very rich. It is quite a beautiful and nice experience. You can build in carrier billing into it. It is really good. It offers a lot of things. I think though, until it's everywhere with all network operators on all devices, it's not going to be better than text. Text is great because everybody in the world who's got a mobile phone.
But there's no doubt, surely, that a promotion that's sitting on an RCS platform versus a similar promotion on a sort of simple text message platform is going to get a better rate of engagement, isn't it?
The RCS, well, I guess so. I mean, it's a more engaging sort of format. But have you ever received an RCS message?
Not yet.
No, so
I'm still waiting.
There you go. You might not know what was going on if you did. I suspect because we're not that familiar with it, and we work in the industry. People outside the industry, I mentioned RCS, and my son just sniggers because he thinks I've said RC. And, other than that, I think people just don't really know what's going on. So I think, Nick Millwood from Mgage makes quite a good case because they're already running some services for marketing services for businesses on it. As Nick Lane did point out, more case studies about brands using it are starting to trickle out into the world. The more that's sort of demonstrated, the more other brands will start to look at trying to use it. as to Jason from Rocco's view, yeah, one day it'll replace SMS or something like it will replace SMS, but not right now. They'll work in tandem with each other. They are just, I think that with the world of messaging, you can't say one thing is going to be better than another. If you want a proper marketing strategy to engage people, you have to use all messaging platforms, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, RCS, SMS, email, and even if you've got the money and the time, leaflets through the door. I mean, everything is still in play. So people want to be engaged in the way they want to be engaged at that moment. And that means being everywhere. So yeah, it was interesting. Paying the pricing of RCS is also somewhat confused. I mean, Nick Millwoods from Engage did actually put a price of 6p per message on it, which is the first time anyone has publicly said how much it would cost a brand to put out an RCS message. So that's about 6 times the cost of a SMS. So it's more expensive. It's a premium way of engaging people currently. But
well, I mean, what a perfect segue into the next session. Engaging people and dating, of course, go hand in hand. And
absolutely.
It was the first time that we brought dating into the show as a special feature, and something that and a vertical that I'm really interested in. I think that over the next 12 months, it's a sector that we probably should be getting closer and closer to, because the message seemed pretty clear. This service has gone from being something that was a little bit under the radar. People were slightly embarrassed about the fact that they were using dating sites. Now, I think it was only last year that I think we got over 50%, whereby now the majority of people see it as a primary way to meet friends and partners for the future. And of course, mobile plays a massive part of that. And we were very lucky to get Ross Williams, the CEO from Venetro, who are essentially white label dating, who provide platforms for so many of the major brands. Simon Corbett, who of course runs the industry media, Global Dating Insights. Andy Warmer, who is the self-proclaimed traffic captain, in fact industry proclaimed traffic captain from trafficpartners.com. And Adam Maxted, who was chairing that, who I know has had a huge amount of experience in there. From my point of view, the aside from all of the obvious mobile applications which enhance a dating service, therefore offering mobile marketing companies, mobile technology companies, and mobile billing companies opportunities to work with dating providers. On the billing side of things, I was slightly surprised right at the end for Ross Williams to sort of say, well, a little bit like the gambling industry, yes, we know DCB's there. Yes, we've kind of written it, or most companies have written it into their strategy, but it's not top of their list. And obviously, I understand that the first thing anyone wants to do is get a subscriber, get their credit card details, job done. But of course, what we know is that by offering a DCB solution, you're going to increase your engagement levels and your acquisition levels, albeit at a higher cost and obviously at a lower margin. But the deal is, of course, once you've got hold of these guys, that's when you start working with them, providing customer service and a good service experience to upgrade them to credit card. But still not massive in the dating business. And I don't know whether or not that's a problem with the dating industry, a little bit like the media, or is it something that we as an industry are not doing properly in order to sell the benefits into these markets?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it sort of like it perfectly encapsulates sort of the conundrum with carrier billing, and I think carrier billing is just one option for paying for things that some people will use. And I don't think it's really anything the industry's doing wrong. I don't think it's the dating industry looking at it funny. It just, some people will use it. The gambling industry were quite early on getting onto carrier billing, and they use it to onboard people and hopefully sort of upsell them into a lengthier subscription. But, they accept that carrier billing will get X% of people will pay through it. The logic is that they'll pay, that's X% more people perhaps than they might have got otherwise. And I think the dating industry looks upon it in the same way. So, I remember once years ago at one of the gambling events that we did run, someone saying, well, the more payment mechanisms you have available, the more chance you've got of someone paying. And I think the same applies to dating. I think the younger generation of people, like you say, are totally mobile, who are looking for the more casual end of dating. are going to perhaps use carrier billing increasingly when, you turn the swiping left or right into something where you need to pay to engage further, shall we say. And it's offered as a one-click, put it on your mobile phone or take it out your credit, they'll start doing it. So I think, yes, horny teenagers is probably where that's really at. I think it's sort of serious data who want, is looking for a life partner. Less so, but as Andy Warmer brought it up, actually, that sort of, people might want to just pay here and there with carrier billing for the non-casual dating to try it out. They might be new to it. They might not have done it before. They might not want to sort of sign up for a year because you think this might be no good. So it's quite a good way of letting people test things out. And,
and that's a message that we as a media company should be putting out to all the verticals that we talk to on a regular basis, of course. I mean, we touched on the limitations of carrier billing, albeit versus from a merchant's point of view versus credit card in terms of the amount that people can actually spend or whether they're likely to spend. But we then moved into the world of e-money, and this is something that is getting talked about a lot now, and this could really give the industry a boost, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I don't know. It was an interesting sort of almost an aside to the carrier billing debate that I thought personally was one of the highlights of the show for me. Was that this company, Donor, who work with charities doing carrier billing led sort of donations to charity. They've worked with lots of charities, and they've discovered that one of the charities want people to donate money when they're watching children in need or whatever, but they also want to sell them a red nose, or or a wristband, or peripheral actual products. And you can't, of course, do that with under the current sort of carrier billing regulations. PSD2 exempts. It gives this exemption so people can use carrier billing to sell digital only things, but there's no way of selling and buying physical goods, not in Europe at least.
Until now.
Donor have got around this rather cleverly by getting an e-money license, which means that all transactions are underwritten essentially by the Financial Conduct Authority. And they work this wonderful process that you appear to buy something like a red nose on carrier billing, but what you're really actually doing is you're buying a gift, essentially a sort of virtual gift card, or that's on credit, that buys the nose, so the money comes off your bill via the network operator who pays the charity. So I buy my nose for £1. My network operator gives the charity £1. I then have the £1 taken off my bill at the end of the month. So it's basically like they've acted like Amex. Network operators become an Amex, and I've bought this sort of virtual gift card to buy a thing, and it gets you round the regulations of using carrier billing for buying physical goods, and it works very well with the charity side of things, where a lot of things often get tested, but you could do it for anything. So I think inadvertently, or probably not inadvertently, Chris Newell, founder and CEO of Donor, has hit upon something that might actually be transformative of how carrier billing works, and what you can do with it.
Was there any discussion about what the network operators would charge for providing that service?
They didn't, no, because it's being sort of trialled in inverted commas with charity. I think they're not sort of taking anything, but yeah, there would be a charge. But there's always a charge. I think with carrier billing, if you get the sort of charge the network operator takes sort of below the kind of 7% mark, then it becomes viable. And yes, that's more expensive than credit card and other ways of doing things, but that's the price you pay for convenience. So
and also being able to reach just about every single,
and being able to reach everybody, and and for some brands, this could be a real breakthrough. I think if not, if it's not, it's still a great thing for the sort of charity sector to do. And I think it's one of these things that we may have to wait a few years, but you might see the sort of principle behind what Donor does cropping up more and more in other things. And anyone who missed Chris's sort of talk about it, there were some very complicated graphs, but in a nutshell, when he explains it, as how it works, you'll be quite amazed, I think. So
will there be more of that covered in the magazine and online?
Much more of that in the magazine, and there's an interview with Chris going up on the website as we speak, where he explains it, and yeah, there'll be loads more, across all our media products in the coming months about this and how it works and where it goes, because it is quite interesting.
Okay, well, so we'll look out for that one. Then we got into some meaty research, and I don't know about you, but I was really pleased that we got Juniper over to Marbella, and I thought that Elson Sotanto, the principal analyst from Juniper, spoke extremely well and delivered some really interesting data on the DCB market. And I mean, from my point of view, if I was going to summarize that, I'd say the world is a big market, and DCB has got a lot of opportunities, or DCB vendors have got a lot of opportunities in places like Southeast Asia, Africa, and markets where we touched on this earlier. Consumers haven't necessarily gone through the pain of the last sort of 20 years of subscription scams and over-regulation, and are really sort of using DCB and buying value-added services on their phones with very little problem, and seem to have a huge appetite for it. And the message was, I think that there's a big market and it's growing.
Oh, massive! Yeah, I mean, Juniper's figures were that in 2018, DCB was $27.7 billion worldwide was spent on DCB buying digital content, and that was 38% higher than 2017. So it's going up, and yeah, where it goes, it could well sort of hit the sort of sort of $50 billion mark before we know it. So yeah, it is a real growth area. It's seeing a lot of use in sort of FANG companies in sort of particularly developing countries, because they don't have any other kind of internet infrastructure. They have a mobile phone bill, but they still want Facebook and Amazon and Netflix and Google and all the rest of it. And so people sort of pay with it. And this comes back to a point you made earlier about the sort of customer service issues being a problem in the UK. I think we're just a much more sort of advanced market. I think in places sort of in Africa, India, and Asia, this is all new to them, and they're not sort of, they don't associate it with fraud. It's just a neat way to pay. And yeah, I think that's where the growth is going to come. I think we'll see growth in Europe and North America, but most of it's going to be Middle East, Africa, developing parts of Asia, because outside of sort of Japan, which already is very big into carrier billing and has been for 20 years. It's huge opportunity. And I think perhaps you might see it feeding back this way. If it's really successful for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, etc., in those regions, they might start thinking, hey, we can maybe we should be doing this in the UK too. Getting kids paying for their Apple Music or their Spotify or whatever with carrier billing.
Well, and again, the interesting thing there is that whilst in this region, or sort of Europe, UK, subscriptions were considered to be one of the routes to to sort of a large number of the complaints. In fact, the real market and consumers actually actively do demand subscription services and seem to be very happy to buy them, as long as they are from trusted brands or being delivered in a responsible way, where the consumer is getting what they are happy to subscribe to. And in fact, they the subscription models seem to be working very well outside of sort of UK and Europe. I just actually want to leap forward to a session that we had at the end of the show, which was focusing on mobile games, which also links back into what we're talking about with dating, because I think, if I'm not very much mistaken, one of the big growth areas for DCB in Southeast Asia was with mobile games, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's games and streaming of Netflix. So, the equivalent of Netflix. It's those two things that really sort of push it. And carrier billing is a great add-on for buying things in games, for buying games, buying subscription in inverted commas to games, sort of what would you call them? They're kind of like games marketplaces. So yeah, it's there. I mean, a lot of money gets spent in game on stuff, and if it's you're playing it on your mobile and it's one click and it's added onto your phone bill, then it makes perfect sense.
Well, talking about that,
it's another way of paying. I think you want to buy whatever it is in a game, you get offered a range of ways to pay for that, and the customer chooses. So yeah, I think it works very well with gaming. The gaming sort of side of it, I think, is definitely one to watch from a carrier billing and a mobile marketing point of view, because I think it's such a big industry. It is so prevalent amongst sort of people under 30. It's just,
So we talked about mobile games with Jake Scott from Reality Cash and VCAS Gold from On Mobile Global on Wednesday. What was their view on how they were going to deploy DCB and as a way of generating revenue through their mobile games?
Well, they were looking at sort of where to add it in which markets for buying stuff in game, because that Reality Clash sort of not only is it an excellent sort of augmented reality game, but it also there's like a whole trading side where you can buy bespoke weapons and sell them on and that kind of thing. So they're looking at where carrier billing would fit into that in certain markets. I don't think you're going to see it on the Reality Clash game in the UK, but you might do in Vietnam, say. So his view of it was that it was a potentially really useful tool, but again, just part of a sort of arsenal of payment tools. What was interesting in that session was VCAS from On Mobile Global, which is essentially a sort of mobile games marketplace, sort of like an Amazon of mobile games. You don't necessarily buy games from the marketplace. You can pay to be a member of the marketplace and get certain games then for free. And while that lends itself to a subscription model, his approach was also to look at, well, we don't have to make people subscribe. We can just remind them every week or every month, do they want to pay again for another month? And this was also brought up in an earlier session by Stephen George at Phonics on 2:30 on Tuesday. He spoke about it, about how you don't necessarily need to sign people into subscriptions. You just need to remind them to pay again. And this gets around all sorts of subscription issues, and in some ways could just totally remove the whole problem of people complaining that they've subscribed to something that they don't want to be subscribed to, because you just sort of think, hey, you've paid for this for a month, then 20 days later you say it's going to expire in 8 days. Do you want to pay again? And you pay again. And not only that, get around to subscriptions, it gives, it means you could keep doing that once a month with carrier billing. So, an interesting idea there as well, I thought.
So that brings us on to that next session, which Julia DeMambro very brilliantly put together. Julia being the CEO from Seriously Fresh Media and someone who's been selling content and value-added services into the sector for probably longer than she would like us to reveal. And she had Barney Postman from Advocator, who's done everything technically there is to do in this market, and Ricardo Duarte from Mabipium, who are sort of one of the most respected affiliate more marketing experts for mobile content in the business, and of course Stephen George from Phonics. And I got the sense that, just really going back to what you said there, and sort of referring to the first session, we've almost gone back to old school sort of values, in that the idea of giving a customer what they want, creating a high quality service, will eliminate a lot of the problems that we've had in the past, and that it is all about treating the business as a proper business, and treating the customer with kid gloves to a certain extent. I thought it was great to hear sessions at telemedia shows with people really talking about proper services and delivering a proper service, rather than just talking about how many millions of minutes you've got or how many millions of clicks you've got, without really thinking about what that means. Probably better to have significantly less clicks and significantly less minutes from customers that are going to continue to pay you for the services that you're providing them with.
Totally, yeah. I mean, that was whole Julia's argument, and the sort of ethos behind Seriously Fresh Media is, rather than you saying I've got carrier billing, give me some content. I don't really care what it is. It's like it needs to be the other way around. It needs to be I've got some really good content or a really good service. I need to add carrier billing as a payment option to this. So yeah, I mean, it's much more focused on the consumer
and who wants to buy it.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of think it has to be that way around. It has to be, I want to access this content. You have to give me the different ways to pay for it. One of those is DCB. And I think getting back to the point that I made that Stephen from Phonics made was that you can also shift it away from this subscriptions idea by just getting people to pay with carrier billing every month, by just reminding them, and it cuts down on all the complaints and all that stuff we talked about at the beginning. A lot of it goes away, and I think I think this is this sort of fresh thinking that came out of this year's show that really struck me. I think overall is that this is being approached in a much different way, much more sensible way. And it's not about, well, of course it's about making money, but it's about sort of, creating cool stuff and making money out of it. And I think that's an important big transformation in the telemedia industry, and the thing that's going to keep it going and hopefully make it a much more mainstream thing, This time next year, Jarvis, we could be millionaires.
And we will have a hotel full of huge media players looking to digitalize and mobilize their offerings. As Mark Challoner had a second opportunity to reveal, where he started to talk a little bit more about how media companies are mobilizing their content. I mean, I think we've sort of already touched on this earlier on, but again, I think he was really making the point that if you've got content, media companies have got plenty of content, they've got to start considering that there's a new generation out there that is prepared to receive and pay for that content using mobile and using mobile billing. And I think that that was, I think, what Mark was talking about in the afternoon on Tuesday, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes back to, it echoed beautifully what Julia had said in the session before, that, it's about having great content. And who's got great content? All those digital media companies, whether they're newspapers or Netflix or even just sort of, a YouTuber who's got like a podcast. I mean, it's all, there's always there's an audience, there's a way to monetize it. And I think that's the essence of what value-added services are. It's about great content and services that we can sit at the top of this pile and push it out towards consumers, and then we work out, what are the best ways to get them to pay for it. And I think carrier billing has a massive opportunity. As I said at the show, that I don't necessarily want to subscribe to BT Sport to watch the entire UEFA Champions League, but I might want to watch, the semi-finals and the final, and I'd pay a premium, and I'd pay by carrier billing just to do that, that evening when it was on. Me and my little boy could sit and watch it. I don't really want to have to sort of like sit through all the heats, and subscribe. So, it's all that sort of thing, because you think like, sports broadcasters have got all that content, radio people have got all that content, publishers have got all that content, newspapers have got all that content. Let's monetize this, let's put it out there, and let's start putting some of that content in with other services like dating and couponing and games. And I think we're at it's all going to get mixed up into all sorts of complicated and interesting offerings around which you can put carrier billing as one way of paying for it.
So I completely agree. So going back to opportunities for carrier billing, again, one of the great developments, I think, not only for the show, but I think for us as a media company, is that we're working closely with our research companies, and also good for the industry that research companies are starting to pay close attention to our sector, because of course the more data that comes out of these various research reports, the more MNOs, vendors, and everyone in the value chain can start to put strategies in place which help grow the market. So working with Nick again this year, we've been talking about getting the Global Value-Added Services Research and Marketing report out. We've been talking about it for a couple of years. I think this was the first time we've actually managed to do it, and Nick was overwhelmed, and really I don't think I've heard him say thank you quite so many times to the audience, because I think he got 120 individual companies contributing to this research.
124, I think it was at the end. Yeah.
Which from a research point of view immediately validates the data, so far more than I think anybody's ever seen before. So we're going to see a lot more of the that data come out through Telemedia Magazine, Telemedia Online, and Telemedia News over the next few months, I know, and I believe that anyone that contributed to that report will be getting an executive summary and all sorts of other goodies and benefits. But needless to say, Nick presented the sort of initial findings, which were, I mean, pretty optimistic, I thought, in terms of where the market's going. And I think it was also nice to see from our point of view that last year the value of trade done at Telemedia was something in excess of $50 million, which was great for us, because if you consider how many people go to World Telemedia, something in the region of 500, that's quite a lot of money per person. So we're obviously doing something right, and we'll obviously be monitoring that figure. What do you think the salient points were in the initial kind of presentation?
Well, I mean, I don't want to give away too much of the research, because obviously, those that took part will get their executive summary, and also, people need to buy the research reports to keep Nick fed and watered so he can continue his quest to research. But the sort of standout findings of it were really that sort of, you take carrier billing and premium SMS and premium voice all together, largely most of those revenues are coming from carrier billing.
Yeah.
The other two sort of help with it. We're going to see a sort of 3.1% compound average growth rate across the years between 2018 and 2023. So by 2023, we're looking at that sort of premium sort of payment business globally being worth about $30 billion, which is good. That's a healthy market. I mean, obviously it would be nice to be even bigger, but if you consider that the amount of money spent digitally online in any given year is in the sort of hundreds of billion, even just getting a tiny percentage of that through carrier billing, it makes for a really big and vital industry. And I think his figures show that it's actually taking more than the share you'd think it might be. So that was one of the sort of interesting findings, I thought. I mean, there's a lot of other numbers in there, which you can watch. His presentation will be online shortly, and of course the research report will go into much more detail. But it's not a massively fast-growing area. It is growing. It's big, and it's a huge opportunity. And as we touched on already, it's there for the taking to add this to all sorts of clever content services, and 5G is going to see a whole load of other new services arrive. There's opportunities that I can't even begin to imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's a nice way to end the day. Although there is one more thing to cover, but I on that point, I'd say that research in terms of how big a market currently is one thing. Research into not that there is any at this point, but into how big the market could be is quite another. And I think that the message came, I mean, if you think about what Mark Challoner was saying about media companies not using DCB and mobile as much as they should be, or the dating industry not doing it as much as they should be, or go back to Rob Rees from Phonics message last year. I think the potential for the industry is huge, and I think that certainly from our point of view, it's up to us, and it's up to the industry to sort of really look at how it can exploit, how it can work more closely with media companies, how it can work more closely with dating companies, because the potential, I think, is greater than perhaps the research would suggest, because research is only based on sort of real transactions, isn't it, and what's happening right now. Whereas it seemed to me as that most of the messages that were coming out of the sort of strategic sessions were that there's a big opportunity there, which is not necessarily making the most of it right now.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, as Caroline Press from 3, did an excited presentation about 5G. There's opportunities for things we haven't even thought of yet for this. So yes, I expect that carrier billing growth to be much higher, particularly as things like 5G penetration grow and 5G uptake takes off. So I think Nick's predictions are great, but might be conservative, but we'll see.
Well, I think that one other thing that I think is really important to remember is that if you're talking about generation X or Y, I can't remember which is which, or Z.
I think it's Z is the one to watch now.
Whichever is the first generation, I think that was.
I think Generation X.
Yeah. They're only just getting jobs now. So that Generation X was already a massive market. But now those the first or the millennials even they're just getting, I think it's millennials, they're just getting jobs. So they're only really starting to get money in their pocket, and yet, they've already been a very important part of this sort of mobile commerce market. I note to self: work out your generations before you bring up.
No, I think the millennials now are having kids, aren't they? Generation X is getting jobs. Generation Z are annoying tweens who are campaigning to save the environment and really telling us that how wrong we actually are. So yeah, I think that's the generations. But yes, like you, I need to brush up on that.
Right, we're getting close to the end. So if we've still got any listeners, although as I say, we do have millions in Southeast Asia, so they'll definitely be hanging on. Just quickly, it was also good to partner with Rocco Research, who are based down in Spain, although they're a global research company with access to over, well, I thought it was 200, but it says 100 here, but it's a lot of mobile operators. That's who they talk to, and they put out the second survey to the mobile operators, and I think this is a really important piece of work for our industry, because all too often I think there seems to be a breakdown between the DCB vendors or service providers and the mobile operators. It's always the mobile operators' fault, and the mobile operators are all saying, well, it's it's the service provider's fault when it comes to things like fraud prevention, or when it comes to not opening up the market, or when it comes to not educating the consumers enough about DCB and all the wonderful mobile billing services that can be offered. So it was very interesting to get some real data back from the MNOs about what they want and who is performing best in their view. And Jason Bryan from Rocco Research gave us some interesting stats in terms of how MNOs prioritised the performance of their vendors and their customers or partners, or depending on how you view it. And we were able to get a short list of the top 4 performing companies. Before we reveal who they were, what were your views on the way Jason conducted the research, and the areas that the MNOs felt were the most important? Obviously, fraud prevention being a clear phase.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I think it's what Rocco bring to this that is so great is sort of giving our industry, I think, access to what the MNOs want and think. And I think sort of between what Nick Lane does and what Juniper does and what Rocco, Jason at Rocco does, we get this. We as World Telemedia and our telemedia publications can show, the whole value chain, what it all thinks of each other. I think unsurprisingly, security and fraud risks around DCB were the network operators' biggest concern about it. I don't think that surprised anyone. I think that the connectivity and service provision are the other things that sort of are on that network operators worry about. And I think it's good to see that they are looking at service provision and the sort of how good these services actually are. I think they need to, and I think this comes back to what we were saying about good content. Is, you know, in some ways you need as many people as possible, including the network operators, saying, but that's, you know, that's not a good service or not good content. So I think you need to wheedle all that out, you know, and it's going to be very difficult. There's, you know, the fraud we sort of all talked about at the beginning is always going to be a problem with that. But you know, if you've got the network operators working on it and putting pressure on the sort of aggregators and content providers and service providers to make sure what they do is really good, you know, you at every stage you're cutting out some of the bad stuff, you know, making, you know, eventually probably one of the cleanest sort of industries there probably is.
Well, I think also if you're a merchant or a content provider working with a billing aggregator, the relationship that aggregator has with the MNO is essential, particularly when problems arise. But I suppose also when it comes to implementation and speed of implementation. And I think on that, I will just now, if you don't mind, reveal the shortlist of 4 that came through. And I'm glad to say that 75% of the shortlist were represented in Marbella. I know, and I know one wasn't able to be there, but will be next year.
Yeah, reveal away. Drum roll, please.
I won't do this in any particular order, but we had Centilli, we had Boku, we had NTH, and the winner of Best DCB Vendor 2019 was that wonderful team from Democo. And it was great to be able to give them an award at the Platinum Party, T-Boot nightclub, with all the glitz and glamour that goes with that. And the awards were very cool. I don't know if you saw them, did you?
I don't think I actually saw I saw the presentation of them. I don't think I actually saw the actual awards that were given. No.
It was, well, there's pictures on the website and on our Facebook pages, but it was a really lovely kind of sustainable award, and it was a sort of lovely carved wooden block with a sort of motif on top, which was made out of a resin, which was printed on a 3D printer. And I need to actually meet up with Buku to make the presentation to Mark Stannard at some point, so that's an opportunity for a boozy lunch that I'm very much looking forward to.
Absolutely. Yes, well done to all of those people. I think, you know, we'll be covering what they did and why they won and stuff in the coming weeks and months. But I think that's a fitting place to sort of stop, really, because I think they exemplify everything about this that we've been talking about. They offer good services, they work well with operators, they've got good relationships, they use carrier billing. And you know, they're quite rightly being sort of lauded for being the best. I think this is something we should all be looking at as to where we take this industry. It should all be like those guys.
Should we all give them a round of applause? Here we go. That sounds great. That's with our live audience. All right. Well, listen, I think that's a great place to wrap up. I mean, as I said, there was a couple of other fraud sessions but we kind of bunched all the fraud issue and cybersecurity in together. One thing I would say, Paul, before we go, and my concluding point, last year it was all about the crypto. We were expecting crypto to be the red hot topic. We had sessions on it. This year it was only mentioned a couple of times. Are we going to be talking about that next year, do you think, or is
don't write off cryptocurrencies. I think we went too soon last year. Blockchain underpins a lot of what network operators do already now, and what banks and all sorts do. I think cryptocurrencies, we're going to see a lot more of cryptocurrencies, and it won't be just Bitcoins and Ethereum and those sorts of things. It will be the trading of points in games and all sorts of things. I think there is a role in there for carrier billing, for sort of getting started in that process. And possibly even through the refund mechanism, getting money back out. But
okay, so
2020 show to discuss that. But of course, we'll be looking at all of that throughout the year in the magazine and in Telemedia Online. We'll be doing more podcasts with some of the speakers and other experts through the coming months on all these subjects and more. So yeah, stay tuned.
And we promise to make them a bit shorter.
Well, yeah, short and snappy. But this was, it's a big show with a lot to get into. We had a lot to talk about. But yeah, it was great.
Well, thanks for your time, mate. And
thanks for yours. It was a great show. Really good. Looking forward already to the next one.